Good morning, everyone. My name is Councillor Bradnan, and I'm the chair of the Joint Development Control Committee. I'd like to welcome you to the Joint Development Control Committee taking place at 10 a.m. on Wednesday, the 16th of August. So other members of the committee are, perhaps, would you mind answering your names so we know you're here? So we haven't got Councillor Bajent yet. Councillor Flaubert is not present, but David Levine is standing in, isn't he? Councillor Porra?
Present, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Smart?
Yeah, present, Chair.
Thank you. Myself, Councillor Fain?
Present.
Councillor Garvey?
Present, standing in for Martin Khan.
Thank you. Standing in for Martin Khan. Thank you. Councillor Hawkins?
Present, Chair.
Thank you. And Councillor Stobart?
Present, Chair.
Thank you very much. So, as I say, we've had apologies from City Councillors Flaubert, Simon Smith and Councillor Thornborough, and Councillor Levine is standing in as an alternate. And apologies have also been received from South Cambs District Councillor Councillor Khan and Councillor Garvey standing in, and we've also had apologies from Councillor Richard Williams. But as Councillor Simon Smith, who is the Vice Chair of this committee, has sent apologies, please could the City councillors nominate a Vice Chair for this meeting only, please? Councillor Porra.
Thank you, Chair. Can I nominate Councillor Martin Smart, please?
Thank you. And do you have a seconder? Thank you, David. Thank you. Martin. Thank you. This has more importance when we're looking at any decisions delegated to the Chair and Vice Chair after the meeting, but thank you very much. Okay, so, and we're quorate in terms of City and District Council, so that's good. The officers permanently at the table for this meeting are the Strategic Sites Manager, Philippa Kelly, the Legal Advisor, Keith Barber, the Committee Manager, Claire Tunnicliffe, and our producer today is Sarah Steed, and we've also got our presenting officer, Mairead O'Sullivan. So thank you very much, all of you, for being here. Copies of the agenda can be found on the City Council's website under Committee Meetings, Minutes and Agendas. Try, when you're making representations or points, please refer to the page and paragraph number, if you can, within the agenda so that we can follow. And then, Councillor Bajent, good. I'm glad to see you're here. Thank you. Please note that everything on your desk, including your laptop screen, may be broadcast at some point. The camera does follow the microphone, so just wait a couple of seconds after you've turned your microphone on before speaking. And please raise your hand to request to speak. For those, if there are any participating in the meeting via Teams, remember that the meeting chat is neither confidential nor private and can be subject to an FOI or GDPR request. So please, can meeting participants keep their microphones and cameras turned off until we come to the application that you'll be speaking on. So the process for considering any application is the planning officer will present the proposal and give an overview of the key issues as set out in their report. And then registered public speakers will be invited to have their say. There will be 3 minutes for those speaking in support and 3 minutes for those speaking against, unless I have advised otherwise. The committee manager will ring a bell when the 3-minute time period has passed, and public speakers are unable to join in with the councillor debate. So then the committee will discuss and debate the item and may ask questions of the case officer. At the end of the deliberation, I'll ask members to vote on the officer's recommendation by a show of hands. So, item 2 is declarations of interest. Could I ask any councillors if they have any declarations of interest on any items on the agenda? Councillor Bajent.
I'm a member of CAMS Cycling Campaign, and I'm sorry I was just a tad late.
That's all right, thank you very much. We're glad to have you with us. And councillor Stobart.
Chair, I'm also a member of Cambridge Cycling Campaign. I know we debate this, but actually we're going to be talking about cycling quite
Yes,
a lot.
exactly. That's fine, thank you very much. So I can see no other requests, registers of interest. So item 3. Oh, sorry, councillor Smart.
Yeah, so I was just thinking it through, Chair. So I'm employed by Adam Brooks. So a previous application that was on the Adam Brooks site, I didn't debate or vote on. So I don't think this applies in that case, though.
Can we ask? Advisor?
Yeah, could I just ask Councillor Smart to elaborate a little bit more? I couldn't follow where he was going.
Yeah,
Sorry.
sure. So I'm employed as a member of bank staff at Adam Brooks Hospital as a bank porter. That's by the by, I suppose. Employment is employment. And so on a previous application, I think it was either the Children's Hospital or the Cancer Hospital or both. So I'm not quite sure. I don't think this applies in that case. It's slightly different, isn't it? A train station.
It's a transport
Yeah.
application, isn't it? Keith, could you advise?
Yeah, I'm quite happy with what I've heard. Councillor Smart, you're welcome to participate.
Yeah. Thanks for indulging me, Chair. I just wanted to check for full transparency.
That's fine. Thank you very much for checking. Okay, so the next item is the minutes. Firstly, the meeting of the 19th of June. Sorry, correction, 21st of June. This was when we elected the chair and vice chair, and we looked at the Cambridge International Technology Park. I hope you've had a chance to read them beforehand, members. And this was questions raised. It was a pre-app briefing, wasn't it? So we were just asking questions and seeking information. Can I just confirm that you're happy with those as minutes of that meeting? Thank you. And the meeting on the 19th of July, when, was that a longer meeting? We looked at the linear park at Clay Farm. And we also had a pre-application presentation. Confirm that you're happy with those minutes? Thank you very much. Thank you. Oh, Councillor Smart.
Interrupt you, Chair, but I'm going to say it now or at the end, I suppose, but before we get on the main business of the meeting, this is the first time we've been in this room for quite a while. And I didn't know if officers were going to check with us councillors and officers for that matter, how we get on today in terms of some feedback. So going forward, that was it really.
Thank you. We can do that at the end. Thank you very much. I will just add a note to my script. Okay, so we've had a request from a member of the public who's registered to speak that we amend the order of the agenda so that we take item 5, which is about the cycle parking, before item 4, which is the design. And I'm quite happy with that. I think it makes some sense. So if we can now turn to agenda item, with your agreement, members, are you happy to do that? Yes? Okay. Right, so we'll move to agenda item 5, which is 21-02957, condition 22. which is West Anglia Main Line land adjacent to Cambridge Biomedical Campus. And I will actually read the title of it. Submission of details required by condition 22, brackets, cycle parking, Cambridge South Station, end of brackets, for phase 4 of the development of the deemed planning consent associated with the Network Rail, brackets, Cambridge South infrastructure enhancements, close brackets, order 2022, local planning authority reference 2102957 TWA. So, please would the principal planner introduce the item, and that's Mairead O'Sullivan. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to draw your attention to the amendment sheet before I start the presentation, there have been 2 representations received since the report was published. One from the Residents Association, which doesn't raise any new points, and another from a resident who flags some issues with the plans and also just a point around security, and those are responded to in the amendment sheet. Plans have been submitted to rectify the issues with scale and mislabelling that the representation raises. And then also just to clarify the reason for the partial discharge of the condition, and it comes back to that point as well raised in that representation. Further information is needed around security in the cycle management plan and how the secure stores will be accessed. So that will come forward as a further submission to close off the condition. So that's why it's for partial discharge today. And then the last point on the slide is another point that the Residents Association have raised. There's a minor typo in the report, paragraph 8.1. This is where their representation is summarised. It's the 3rd bullet point on that, and it should read, there will likely be more demand on the eastern side for CBC staff rather than the western side. So,
Just before you go on, is all of that contained in the amendment sheet that we've received, and have members had a chance to see it?
everything except the last point about paragraph 8.1 is on the amendment sheet, and that point I'm just raising verbally as it came after the amendment sheet was published. So the site is located partially within Hobson's Park to the west and within the biomedical campus to the east, on a plot between the Anne McLaren building and the AstraZeneca site. The Cambridge Guided Busway Bridge is to the north of the site here. And here's just an aerial view which I think better illustrates the uses. So to the west we have the residential area of Trumpington. To the east we have the biomedical campus. So I've highlighted with the guided busway bridge to the north of the site. And then to the south, down here is the green belt, which then stretches up as a green finger along Hobson's Park and beyond. So just a bit of background before we get into the application. So the station was dealt with as a Transport and Works Act order application. This was submitted in June 2021, and the hearing happened in the spring of 2022, with it being determined in December 2022. Pre-commencement conditions were submitted immediately in January, and works commenced on site in the spring of the year. And the submission of the station design and related conditions, which are the cycle parking condition that we're about to look at, as well as the public art condition and waste condition, were submitted in June. And then as well, just a little bit of background, because we're hearing the cycle parking condition first. It's more of a kind of a general explanation that the Transport and Works Act order granted permission to construct and operate this 4-platform station. You'll see the station comprises an element at either side of the tracks with an overbridge connecting and a new island platform in the middle. As I said, it was dealt with as a Transport and Works Act order, and that had a deemed planning permission associated with it that grants the planning consent, and that had 39 conditions, and conditions 17 and 22 are conditions on that consent. So condition 22 is worded as follows. The key things we're looking at as part of this condition are the number of cycles, their location, the type of stands, the means of enclosure, and the cycle management plan. And also we're giving consideration to the impact on Hobson's Park and the green belt from cycle parking. So just to give kind of an overview of the station before we get into the detail. On the eastern side is on the bottom here, and this is the only area where there is vehicular access. There will also obviously be pedestrian and cycle access, which will come in here. The cycle parking is located here, and I'll show this in a bit more detail in a moment. The forecourt design is dealt with as part of the landscape condition and is not part of either of the conditions that we'll be looking at today. And on the top element here, that's Hobson's Park, the western side, and that will be accessed by pedestrians and cyclists, and a new path will be coming in here to provide access. This again will form part of the landscape condition, as will the forecourt design, and one of the points raised by the representations relates to impact in terms of additional cycling in the park. That's not something that we can consider today, but there will be signage details provided as part of the wayfinding strategy, which again comes forward as part of the landscape condition. Just briefly to provide some elevations as we're looking at this cycling condition first. We have the western elevation here with the canopy which sweeps down, and the cycle parking on Hobson's Park is contained within this canopy here. On the eastern elevation, the biomedical campus side, we have the main building here, and the cycle parking is actually located to the north of the station entrance, so it's not shown on this elevation here. We can just see the railing and the canopies that cover the platform in this view here. So the overall cycle parking numbers are provided here. There are a little over 1,000 cycle parking spaces being provided across both sides, with slightly more provided on the western side at Hobson's Park, which is in line with the transport assessment done as part of the TWAO application. In terms of the numbers of types of stands, there is a high proportion of two-tier stands to make best use of space and a very small constrained site. But the overall breakdown in terms of two-tier to other stand types is policy compliant, complies with Part L of the Cambridge Local Plan, which requires that 20% minimum are Sheffield stands, and here we have 24% being standard bays and a further 7% being enlarged or inclusive spaces, bringing it to 31% of spaces being non-two-tier stands. And then we also have about 30% of the overall numbers are in secure stores. So starting on the eastern side, as I said, the cycle parking is located here. This is adjacent to the embankment of the guided busway bridge. Here we have the layout of the cycle parking on the eastern side. The open canopy spaces are nearest to the station entrance, and the secure stores is nearer the kind of entrance of the site. Types, the two-tier spaces are pushed back against the railing against the embankment. The enlarged and Sorry, I think my microphone reset itself there. Can you hear me? So, and here we have the overall numbers of spaces provided in the open canopy. And then in terms of the secure store, similar layout with the double tier spaces pushed towards the embankment, the Sheffield stands towards the outer edge. And here we have the numbers in the secure store. There is also some electric charging points provided in the secure store for the enlarged bays and sort of future passive provision for the Sheffield stands. And then in terms of the overall numbers for the spaces at the eastern side, we've got 76% of them are two-tier spaces, 24% are either enlarged or standard bays, and then we've got 28% in the secure store and 72% in the open canopy. In terms of the elevations for the eastern cycle parking, we've just got the top view, which shows the open canopy under the biodiverse roof. And then this one shows the elevation of the secure cycle parking area. And then the bottom view is looking from sort of Francis Crick Avenue, and you've got the end of the store here and the station building behind in terms of the elevation. And then we've got the CGI, which is providing a similar view to the elevation. You can see the secure cycle parking for the east in the foreground and the station building in the background, and the guided busway bridge here. Moving to the west side, the cycle parking is located under the main sweep of the roof. The sedum roof drops down to a biodiverse roof that covers the cycle parking, and also part of provides cover to platform 4. The western cycle parking layout is quite similar to the east. We've got the open canopy spaces nearest to the station entrance and the secure store further down. Again, the double tier spaces are pushed back. Those are up against the railing that separates the store from the platform. And then we've got the enlarged and inclusive bays nearest the station entrance and the Sheffield stands on the outer edge here. And then we've got our overall numbers here. And similarly with the secure store, and again, there are electric charging points provided in the secure store on the western side as well. And then in terms of the total number of spaces on this side, we've got 30% are either enlarged or standard bays, and 32% of the spaces are in the secure stores. And then again, the elevations with these ones in the open canopy on top, the secure store here on the bottom, and then this view here is a sort of sectional view across showing the gate of the secure store, and here you can see how the canopy extends over the platform, and then you can also see the canopies of the other platforms. And there is a little bit of crossover in terms of the cycle parking condition and the station design condition. So there'll be a little bit of overlap here, but one of the elements of the station design condition requires that the station complies with the parameter plans that were approved as part of the Transport and Works Act order. This sort of orange dashed line, which hopefully you can make out in the plan, this is the maximum envelope permitted by the Transport and Works Act order. And as you can see here, the building does fall within the maximum envelope, and actually you can see on the Hobson's Park side, which is at the top, that it is shorter than the maximum envelope and narrower also than the maximum envelope permitted. And then in terms of height as well, the height of the canopy, we have the orange line here. This shows the guardrail on top of the biodiverse roof is at the maximum height of this, but actually the roof is 1.1 metres lower than that guardrail and is well within the parameter plans permitted. And then here we have a view looking at that canopy on Hobson's Park. So as I say, the canopy does fall within the parameter plans. The inspector in her report left it open that that a reduced number of cycle parking could be provided on the Hobson's Park side. Officers haven't required this and are comfortable with the levels provided. As noted, the station building falls within the parameter plans and is less so than the parameter plans on Hobson's Park. Reducing the envelope of the canopy on Hobson's Park would have negative impacts in terms of the design. It would have limited benefits because you will still be able to see the canopies of the island platform and the canopy of the platform on the eastern side of the station beyond. It also has biodiverse and is needed. It's needed as part of the biodiversity requirements, as well as the BREEAM requirements. And were there to be less cycle parking provided, it would just result in, and the canopy to remain as it is, would just result in empty space under the canopy and not making the best use of that space. Just to briefly show the different stand types, the first three are the different types of enlarged and inclusive bays. We've got the first one is a half-height stand with floor anchors. Then we've got another sort of half-height Sheffield stand here. Both of these are elongated bays. And then we've got a shorter bay that has a half-height stand and floor anchors also, as well as standard bays. Briefly to mention, cycle parking is located for staff in the biomedical campus side on the eastern side within this maintenance area. This is accessed through a secure gate here, and staff will have access to the main building here. And then, as I've highlighted, the cycle parking management plan doesn't have much detail in terms of how the secure stores will be managed. At this stage, the operator doesn't have that detail, so further information will be needed to close off the condition, and that's the reason for partial discharge being recommended today. So to conclude, although the full number of spaces are being provided, the footprint on Hobson's Park is less than the parameter plan's maximum envelope, and officers are satisfied that the impact on Hobson's Park is acceptable. The mix of stand types provided is policy compliant, and over a third of the spaces will be provided in secure stores. And I should have mentioned earlier, all of the remaining cycle parking in the open canopy is covered by CCTV footage. We have been provided with plans that demonstrate that the open canopy, they are fully covered by CCTV cameras. We're not able to publish those plans for security reasons, but officers are satisfied that those are acceptable, and as well as that the canopies would benefit from, the open canopies would benefit from a good level of natural surveillance. So the recommendation is to approve and partially discharge the condition.
Very much, Ms. O'Sullivan. So we now turn to public speakers. And we have firstly David Plank from the Trumpington Residents Association, who is objecting to the application. So if you'd like to come up. Have you used the microphone system before, Mr. Plank? Oh, right, good. Okay. So remember, you have 3 minutes to make
Good morning.
representation. Okay, thank you.
I have provided a written statement to the committee officer, and I'll read it out. I'm representing the Trumpington Residents Association. We support the station as a destination station for the Cambridge Biomedical Campus. It will help to reduce the traffic on our roads as the campus develops. Hobson's Park on the western side of the station, which is in the green belt, is a tranquil place in a busy area. The planning inspector confirmed this. We have tried to limit the station's impact on our park and to get the Cambridge Biomedical Campus to live up to its responsibilities in delivering the station. Despite this, a 20 to 30 metre wide strip is effectively being taken out of the park from the guided busway to the station on the western side of the railway, this being the gap between the new shared use path to the station and the shared use path to the campus alongside the guided busway. And the largest of the construction compounds is in our park until 2025. We objected at the public inquiry to Network Rail's proposal for cycle parking spaces, not only because it took space out of the park, but also because hundreds of cycle movements each day through the park on the new shared use path threatens the very tranquility which we value. Also, as the destination of this destination station is the campus, why is it proposed to have so many spaces on its western side, forcing cyclists to leave the station and cross Addenbrooke's Bridge on an already very busy shared use path to get to their destination in the campus? This did not make sense to us and still does not. Network Rail has not made its case for 1,000 spaces evenly split between the east and the west. This is not a product of the transport assessment that Network Rail refers to, but an assumption made in that assessment. Also, the trip destination information, which the transport assessment does contain, supports a 30-70 split west-east, not 50-50. The application also conflicts with the recommendation made by the planning inspector following the public inquiry, which cast doubt on the need for 1,000 spaces in total, particularly the 500 proposed on the western side. It also conflicts with the Secretary of State's decision, which followed the inspector's recommendation. Network Rail undertook at the public inquiry to carry out further studies to inform the decision about the number of spaces at the station and their east-west split, a fact recorded in their closing statement and in the inspector's report. Yet the application makes no mention of these further studies or their findings. I have about 30 seconds more. As we've been dealing with this matter from 2016, I think that's reasonable.
I will use my discretion to permit
Thank
you
you.
to finish.
It is for these reasons that we object to this application and ask the committee not to agree it in the form proposed, but to place a limit of no more than 300 cycle parking spaces in the western station. If in the event a total of 1,000 spaces proves to be necessary, the Cambridge Biomedical Campus should provide the land necessary to allow additional spaces on the eastern side of the station. We do not buy the argument that there is not sufficient land.
Could you draw your argument to a close, Mr. Plank?
Network Rail seeks to bring in arguments on the proposed design of the station in aid of its cycle parking application, yet it is Network Rail that has chosen to base its design on 500 spaces in the western station building, which the planning inspector made clear was probably an overestimate, as was the 1,000 spaces total.
Thank you. I'll draw you to a close there. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much indeed. Okay, so we now move on to Elliot Stamp, who's representing Network Rail. Thank you very much, Mr. Stamp. You actually have 4 minutes 20 if you need it.
I've reduced it down to...
So perhaps you can
Good morning.
You've got that amount of time. Anyway, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Elliot Stamp, Network Rail's Town Planning Manager for the Anglia route. The provision of high-quality cycle parking is a key objective of the project, and it has been thoroughly considered throughout the station design process. Importantly, the proposed cycle parking is compliant with national and local planning policy, and as confirmed within the committee report, it is supported by GCSP officers. A range of different parking options will be provided, catering for a variety of bicycles. There will be spaces for standard and non-standard bikes, including e-charging points. Bike repair and maintenance hubs will also be provided to encourage use of the facilities. Security is of the utmost importance, with 1/3 of spaces provided within secure stores. The other cycle parking areas will be covered by CCTV and will have a good level of natural surveillance. All of the cycle parking areas will be covered and protected from the weather by the station canopies. Whilst a few objections have been raised from local groups and residents requesting a reduction/phased approach to the delivery of cycle parking provision on the western side of the station, Network Rail has set out clear and robust justification as to why a phased approach is not appropriate and that it would, in fact, result in a number of negative impacts on Hobson's Park and the wider station project. As evidenced within the committee report, this matter has been fully assessed and considered by GCSP officers, and in agreement with Network Rail, they believe that the proposed cycle parking levels have been justified and that a phased approach to the provision of cycle parking is not warranted or appropriate. It is important to understand that when approving the TWAO, the Secretary of State and Inspector accepted the levels of cycle parking proposed by the Transport Assessment and did not specifically require a reduction in overall cycle parking numbers. They suggested that a phased approach to the delivery of 500 cycle spaces on the western side of the station could be considered as part of Condition 22. As explained, this has been considered by Network Rail and GCSP officers, and a phased approach is not considered necessary or appropriate. Both Network Rail and GCSP officers agree that the delivery of all of the cycle parking provision at the same time is the most efficient and reasonable approach. This will encourage even greater sustainable travel to Cambridge South Station, which is increasingly important given the continued impacts of climate change and the growth of the CBC and wider Cambridge area. We encourage the Planning Committee to support the findings and recommendations of GCSP officers and approve this application.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stamp. That's helpful. So, members, the first element of our consideration, we can ask questions of clarification to the case officer only, and then we will move on to debate. So, I'll start us off with some questions, if I may. So, Mairead, there's quite a proportion of two-tier stands, and but we've still got more than the minimum requirement of single Sheffield stand. But I just wondered, do we know if there are suitable locking arrangements on the two-tier stands, or is that a detail that will come later? Because one of the reasons people have tended not to use upper parts of two-tier stands is because locking arrangements aren't very good. I just wondered whether you had detail of that. Another question was, it would be useful if you could clarify, I know it's probably part of the consideration, no, I'll come to that in the consideration of the design. And the other thing was, could you clarify what a half-height Sheffield stand is and what it's for?
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the locking detail, that isn't something that we've had or required, but if members felt it was needed, that is something that we could seek in an informative included to inform the applicant that that would be needed to discharge the condition, as it is a partial discharge. And then the other point was around, sorry, forgive me.
The other part was half-height.
So the half-height stands are useful for cargo bikes and larger bikes. They're not as tall as a standard Sheffield stand, and they usually also include floor anchor points. They give more options in terms of how you lock up your bike.
Very much. So, Councillor Stobart.
Thank you, Chair. So, first question about usability. So,
Councillor Stobart, can you just bring your microphone a little closer to you? Thanks.
So usability. So seeing a design like this, you can imagine yourself, with like 5 minutes to go before your train arrives, actually trying to park up. Anecdotes aside, what has been the effort put into and the results of an investigation of how people flow around this area. Perhaps coming up to busy times, less busy times when safety and security become more greater concerns. And I think we have touched on the locking of the secure areas and how easily that works. So people are coming and going. They need to be sure that they get in and out very, very quickly and easily.
Councillor
That's a-
Stobart, I'm mindful that some of those questions might be coming under design. Mairead, is that your impression, or are you happy to answer those under this element?
Maybe that those are quite detailed points that might be part of the discussion rather than points of
Do you want me
clarification.
to hold off? Because it was, I've got a couple of other questions on keeping the place tidy, which I think is, again, more a design question. And then what are the travel routes that people will use to and from the station?
Certainly routes comes under the design of the
Yes,
building.
so I'll hold off.
Okay, so I think, is there any of that you want to answer under this part of this condition?
So under this condition, I guess we could cover the security of the cycles is something. Perhaps it's more something for the detailed discussion, but just that, as I say, all of the cycle parking is covered by CCTV. There will be a good level of natural surveillance. The stores are very near the entrance to the building and have a good level of overlooking, and there will be people coming and going. If there are any cycle thefts, there are details in the management plan about how people can get access to the CCTV footage. And just that also, if you're using those cycle canopies, you're covered by the canopy from the when you park up your bike to when you get into the station. So if the weather is bad, you're covered. I think that might cover
Thank
that.
you. So remember, this is points of clarification. Councillor Fane?
Yes.
There we go. Yeah, I'm not one of those who declared an interest as a member of Cambridge Cycling Campaign. I cycle occasionally and hitch my bike to whatever seems like a suitable stand. I think I'd recognise a Sheffield stand, but I wouldn't have detailed knowledge of the others. There weren't any illustrations of what these things look like, but I'm happy to assume that officers have got that right. My one concern was, if we look at the tables on page 52 and 53, the percentage for enlarged and inclusive spaces, 6 to 7%. Now, it seems to me that quite a few of the people parking their cycles here may have taken children to nursery or something like that first. There is a growing percentage, particularly with electric bicycles, of larger bikes. And is it possible that people will arrive with larger bicycles and find that these 6 to 7% spaces have already been taken by others because they're more convenient?
Do you want to respond?
Thank you, Chair. So I think it's a case of first come, first served with all cycle parking, but in terms of the local plan policy, we're within the standards, which just require that a minimum of 20% are standard bays and doesn't actually set any minimum requirements for enlarged or inclusive spaces. And officers felt that 7% was a good level of provision, bringing it to sort of 31% that are not two-tier spaces.
And my impression is, excuse me, that actually cargo bikes, and I'll seek to ask the people who have declared an interest in CAM cycling campaign. My impression is that for a cargo bike, you could attach it to an ordinary Sheffield stand, even if it wasn't in an enlarged space. I'm looking at Councillor Bagent here. Because there's no length limit.
It very much depends on.
It very much depends on how the bike in the other stand has been
Yeah, okay.
parked.
So in
And
print,
in the reality, I've got a trike, which is about the same width as a cargo bike, and they are not easy to park. they take up the whole space, and if there's a bike in the other one, it's difficult. I think what's been said here about the shortage of those spaces is probably correct. People are going to increasingly use wider bikes.
Okay, thank you. So the clarification was 6-7% enough? We can move on to that in discussion. Councillor Garvey.
Spoke about an embankment behind the bicycle racks. What is that embankment?
Through you, Chair. The embankment is just the existing embankment that's part of the guided busway bridge.
Mairead, if you could show your the sort of CGI imagery of the eastern view of the station approach. I think that, yes, that one, that's great. So you can see, Councillor Garvey, that it's not very easy to see, but the guided busway is higher than the back of the cycle rack, so it's set into the bank. Can I just take the liberty of coming in before Councillor Porritt? While we're on that imagery, I wanted to ask about the access from that. Oh, sorry, I was going to do that under the design. Councillor Porritt.
Thank you. Just for clarification, the officer mentioned that the CCTV will be part of a later bit of the discharge. CCTV access has been a huge problem at the current Network Rail cycling at the main Cambridge station, particularly getting access to it. I suppose I'm asking, obviously this isn't a planning application, we can't attach more conditions, I'm guessing, because this is already a condition. I have some real concerns that unless we are absolutely certain people can access that, without this thing about we haven't got time, which is what a lot of people have been told at the current one. I mean, how confident is the officer that we can control that in some way? Because I'm not sure if the partial discharge will come back to full committee. I don't think it will. But I am concerned at the moment that it's fine to say it's overseen by CCTV, but if people can't see that quickly enough, on the day it's been stolen and get to the police, and I appreciate there are some delays with the police as well, but how confident are you that what can we do today to ensure that doesn't happen? We don't replicate the same mistakes we've had at the previous Network Rail cycle parking at the main station.
Through you, Chair. So just to be clear, the CCTV coverage is part of this application. It's about access to the secure stores is the key thing, and how that will happen, whether it'll be fobs or keys or codes or an app that will come forward as part of a future application. In terms of what's been provided, we have plans that show that all of the cycle parking is covered by CCTV cameras, and the cycle parking management plan details the process for how you would get that, and that is getting in touch with the operator of the station. I don't think that there's anything further that the planning system can do to control that, as it is as an external process.
But maybe we can do something through an informative. Remember, members, these are conditions, so we cannot add conditions to existing conditions, but we can add informatives. Okay, Councillor Smart.
Thanks, Chair. Well, I hope so. That was one of my points. So I've got 3.5. So the first thing is like a preamble. So I was a bit, I didn't quite understand the questions, debate, design, detail and discussion components of this. So if I asked the wrong thing at the wrong time, you say. But I just wanted to firstly, so the main things are, firstly, wanted to pick up on what the speaker, David Plank, said. So he said, well, quite rightly, the Greenbelt is a tranquil area. I agree with that. And tranquility is important. So he said that the numbers that came out of the study, and I might have misheard him here, but seemed to be not appropriate, but the numbers that were sort of assumed from the study. He said that the trip destination seemed to imply it should be a 30-70 split west-east, but not the 50-50 west-east split, suggesting that 300 in the western was more appropriate. And just to cut to the chase, I got the impression that the implication was that the applicant was attempting to use greenbelt land because basically it's cheaper than land on a site that's easily developed, like the biomedical campus. Perhaps that could be responded to. And just my other little points that I made before the speakers were, well, firstly, the first thing I noticed is it has a roof, and it seems to be, looks to me like you could get up on it. I don't know if that's something you want to talk about now. Now, if you can get up on that roof, it has no barrier around the edge of it, and that could be
It does
dangerous.
have a barrier around the edge. We were told that it has a barrier
Couldn't
around the
see
edge.
one. Okay. So the points about cycling are a comparison with other Cambridge stations would be useful in terms of numbers at least. The other point of 4 is I've said before in all cycling things that the whole thing of cycling and electric bikes and now scooters and 3 different types of scooters, 2 electric and 1 not electric, things are being invented all the time. Is this going to accommodate the most reasonable assumption for what is going to be used in the future? As Councillor Porras said, the devil is in the detail. I've been sitting on meetings about cycle racks being unscrewed for years, literally, and I'm just hoping that these ones won't be unscrewable. Whenever I lock my bike up, I think, is it going to be there when I get back? Because you just don't know, because you just need the right little device to undo it or saw it through. Finally, it'll be useful to see the routes to the cycle parking from the public highway for public and staff parking. That's the end. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Smart. So, Mairead, I've captured some of those, but hope you captured most of them.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and get through all of those. So in terms of the trip budget, a transport assessment was done as part of the Transport and Works Act order, and as part of that, numbers of cycle parking was agreed with the County Council, and that set out that there would be more need for cycle parking on the western side rather than the eastern side, because people using the eastern side would leave their bicycles at their destination rather than at the station. In terms of the use of Hobson's Park over the biomedical campus land, if I just go back to the kind of general slide here, maybe go back to the one that's not marked up. The eastern side of the station has vehicular access and has a lot of work to do. It has to provide taxi drop-off, blue badge spaces, and there is no capacity for further cycle parking to be provided on that side. And actually the length of the canopy on that side is getting up to where the maximum envelope goes to. Where
Can the public speakers hear us? Are you having difficulty hearing the gentleman at the back?
All of a sudden it went.
The,
We were having difficulty previously.
I was directing my question also to the gentleman behind you. Can you hear now?
Yes, we're fine.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Mairead, do carry.
Thank you. So just to confirm that there is no space on the eastern side for any further cycle parking. And then in terms of actually the take from the Greenbelt and from Hobson's Park, if I go back to the parameter plan drawing that I showed, that gives the outline of the maximum station building. So Network Rail were permitted to build out anything within this envelope as part of the Transport and Works Act order. This is the maximum envelope set by the parameter plans. And as you can see, this kind of space here, they haven't gone to the full length in Hobson's Park in terms of land take, and then also the canopy is narrower than it could have been, so they've made better use of space on this side, so managed to provide all of the spaces with less land take. There was a question about access to the roof.
Yeah.
So there is a guardrail on one side because the biodiverse roofs, those will need a lot of management and maintenance. So there needs to be a guardrail on top for that. And the station will be a secure station, there will be, CCTV footage and monitoring of that. So that would fall outside.
Just to clarify that, the diagram showed a guardrail on the east side of the biodiverse roof, but not on the west side. But the question was, is there sufficient protection to stop people falling off on that side?
So there is a guardrail also on the Hobsons Park side, on the west side. And in terms of comparison to other stations, I don't have the number of cycle parking in either of the other two stations. This has been assessed on its own merits rather than in comparison to the other stations. And in terms of access routes, perhaps if I go to the actual wider site location plan, that might be the best way to show. So in terms of access routes for cyclists, there we've got Trumpington here and the guided busway here. There will be a new path providing access for cyclists and pedestrians here. This isn't part of either of the applications that we're considering today. This is part of the landscaping condition. But for information, this would be something like a resin-bound gravel path that was segregated with cycle and pedestrian access and signage. And then in terms of access from the other side, obviously you can cross the guided busway bridge or come at it from another point within the biomedical campus, but access will be off of Francis Crick Avenue. I can show it in slightly more detail on this. So this is Hobsons Park here, and this is that path that I talked about, and this is where that would access. Cyclists would filter down here into the cycle parking, and pedestrians would come straight into the station building here. And then moving to the biomedical campus, we've got Francis Crick Avenue here, so you could either come from the guided busway or from on this side of the biomedical campus. If you're coming from the southern part of the biomedical campus, there will be a sort of Copenhagen-style crossing here to give priority to pedestrians and cyclists over cars. And then cyclists will filter into the inner element here nearest the cycle parking, and pedestrians encouraged to be on the outer piece here, with then access into the station here.
While you're on that diagram, can you show us what you think, has any provision been made for scooters?
So there hasn't been any provision made for scooters as it stands. It's cycle parking.
To me, just wanted to. So I've just Googled it while you were speaking, Mairead, and it's for everyone. It's 1,000 at Cambridge North and 2,850 at Cambridge Central. So just to put that on the table. Seems to be correct, I think.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. Page 49, paragraph 12.6. This talks about, this is again going back to the issue of Hobson Park and how much has been taken off. The inspector considered the cycle parking, etc., and that it has to be justified because it took, it had impact on the Hobson's Park and the Greenbelt. Now, I know that there's been a traffic, what do you call it? Traffic assessment?
Yes, transport assessment.
Transport, thank you. But we haven't seen that. Not that I don't believe that that's been done. It's just, can we have a bit more detail on what that traffic assessment is based on? Considering the South Station is supposed to take 1.8 million passengers a year. Like, how many of those are going to be using cycles, where the cycle's coming from, and how that transport assessment actually was done, the basics of it. Thank you.
Mairead, if you can confirm that there has been a transport assessment and it was part of this application.
Thank you, Chair. So it isn't part of this application. It was submitted as part of the Transport and Works Act order and hasn't been sort of reopened as part of this application. What it says is that 95% of users will access the station using sustainable transport means, It predicts, I think, 790 cycle trips daily by 2031, approximately. I'm pulling big numbers from it now. Network Rail haven't done any further studies. We've been satisfied with what to base our assessment on that work that was done as part of the Transport and Works Act order, and that the impact on Hobson's Park is acceptable due to the design and the lesser land take than was permitted by the maximum station envelope that we'll look at in the station design condition.
Who did the transport assessment? Was that Network Rail or was that somebody?
It would have been the applicant.
Thank you. David, Councillor Levine.
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad to see there's security parking. I'm looking at page 51, 13.1. I see that the measures to actually get into the secure parking have not been determined yet. That's fair enough. Who gets to use the secure parking? Is it by application? Is it by a particular type of user? Or other means, shall we say? Be interested to know the answer to that.
So, Mairead, do you know, have we had any indication of who will get the secure parking?
Thank you, Chair. So as I say, that detail will come forward in the management plan, but it's open to the public, but just how it will work is yet to be determined.
Okay. So, members, nobody else wishes to ask a matter of clarification, so I think we'll open for general debate. Who would like to start us off? Okay, Councillor Porrer, thank you.
Thank you. I am a little concerned about the CCTV issues because I do think, given that we can't condition it, I am uncomfortable with the discharge in the future if we're not certain that the public can access in a timely manner, as can the police, because that has not been the case with Network Rail in Cambridge, as I think Councillor Smart alluded to. We've been through endless discussions in city area committees and elsewhere about this. So I would really welcome at least an informative saying that we expect very clear clarification and a better procedure than the ones already available.
I'd suggest you have a think about the sort of wording you might want for that, and I will also think about that too before the end of this.
The second thing, in paragraph 15.1 talks about signage, because I know local residents are worried about people kind of creating desire lines with cycles and just cycling across the park and not using the designated path. Can I suggest as well that we make very clear we want the signage in place before the site opens? Because one of the issues will be is if we start, people will start riding across and will start creating their desire lines. We need to be absolutely certain that that signage goes in early. And I might also suggest signage on the cargo bike and adapted bike areas to remind people not to park there unless they actually have a need. Though I am reassured, I think, from other applications we've had, so I think the AstraZeneca and a few others, that most staff areas on the Addenbrooke site are now aiming for net zero, are now having their own travel hubs. So I have some sympathy that people with cycling over with their kids to work will also have alternative means, but I always welcome more cargo and adapter bike. I do have concerns about if you have to pay to use the secure ones. I suspect that will be one of the means of control. Again, I think we're limited in what we can control, but it would be good to note that we don't want that to be excessive. And the 2 tiers, I know we have talked at this committee before about having the gas-assisted ones, I think, which allow the bike to be lifted up. So again, and finally, I think my understanding is that because of the needs of the biodiverse green sedum roofs, even if we were to reduce the parking on the western side, the roof would still need to be that big. And I think what the planning officer is saying, I think hopefully she'll correct me if I'm wrong, is that actually, I mean, I'm always welcome more parking because I think in the future we will have more people coming there. And I do note that obviously Network Rail could have put a load of random stands outside and they have actually managed to fit them under the roof. But if the planning officer could just confirm that that is the case, that even if we were to knock 200 cycle spaces off on the western side, that roof wouldn't change shape. So the land take wouldn't be reduced. I think that is my understanding. And obviously I welcome the larger spaces. I welcome the e-charging, although I note the safety implications of batteries, so I hope Network Rail will be keen to install smoke alarms and things, given we've had very tragic recent events with e-bike charging here. And I welcome that they have reduced the line.
My impression, perhaps we can just clarify, my impression is that even if the cycle parking was removed, that the roof would stay. And also, one of the things that occurred to me was that if you arrived on the east side, wanting to go, say, to London, and there wasn't a space for you, I wanted to know whether you'd navigate through the station and out the other side to use the cycle parking on the west side, or how would you do that? Because you'd be going out of the station again, wouldn't you, to get to the cycle parking? So is it okay to ask the officer to clarify that? Sorry. So if you arrived at either side and there wasn't sufficient parking and you wanted to try the other side, would you have to go into the station concourse and out again, and then in again?
Thank you, Chair. So if you went to park your bike at one side and found that there was no space, you wouldn't have already crossed through the ticket line yet. So I think you would just go across the guided busway bridge and go at it externally. It would be possible to bring your bike through the station, through the ticket gate. All of the stairs have a cycle rail on them, which will come to as part of the station design. But the stairs can be accessed with your bike. The lifts are also very large size and can take 2 people with 2 bikes. So it is possible that you could move but you would have to then exit the ticket gate at the other side, lock your bike, and then go back through.
But that wouldn't have network rail implications, would it? There wouldn't be an implication that you'd used your ticket.
I'm not able to comment on that.
I sort of was thinking about the routes of travel and thinking that could be problematic. And the way around the back is quite long. But anyway, we'll come to that. Anybody else wanted to? Martin, Councillor Smart, and then Councillor Fane.
5 things. So firstly, good that the applicant is providing cycle parking. To that these days, I guess, but it's still a good thing to get it. Secondly, I think one of the debates for us today is the green belt, as the speaker has spoken about, although the officer has said there's a good reason for using the green belt and not the other side. But I think using the green belt is a concern. Using any land that's protected in any way like that is something needs to be defended by the applicant and the report and so on for us to be keen to do. Thirdly, secure parking. So as Councillor Levine has said, or asked about, we're not sure how that's working yet. I'm just presuming it'll be something residents need to pay for. That will make it secure, which means we have sorry about the pun, but we have a 2-tier parking system. Those that can afford to pay and those that can't afford to pay. And I'm also concerned, getting past that, whether the secure parking will be secure, because if you can pay to get inside the secure parking, it means you can nick something. Fourthly, is it enough? I know that Mr. Blank has spoken about it being too many, but Cambridge North has 1,000. I think they weren't all used at the start. I don't know how it's going now, but my feeling is that this could be a more used facility, Cambridge South, but I don't base that on any evidence, just on my knowledge of the city and the site, the biomedical campus. And finally, just the types of vehicles. So it's been said, I think, by the officer that there's been no consideration of the diverse nature of 2-wheeled or whatever, 4-wheeled transport, bicycles, scooters, mopeds, etc., and anything else to be developed in the future, electric, skateboards, whatever. It's a wild situation going forward. Anything could get invented, we just don't know. And this seems to be just accommodating bicycles, which is great for bicycles, but it might cause chaos in the future if other types of things are parked in spaces that are designed for bicycles and there's no accommodation.
From a chair's point of view, I think the officers have given a good deal of thought to various types of transport, perhaps some of the ones that haven't been invented yet are not surprisingly not being considered. I think it might be useful to have some thought on scooters. But anyway. Okay, Councillor Fane. Back to you, Councillor Smart. Councillor Fane first.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to deal with the substantive issues raised by TRA, who say that they support the station as a destination. I am satisfied by what the officer has told us, that this is within the area approved, and that it has not, that there is the right balance between the numbers of cycle spaces on the east and west sides, as far as one can tell. I mean, obviously these things subject to confirmation, and it has not taken an undue amount of Hobson's Park. Beyond that, I'm always wary of sometimes called the bike shedding phenomena, which is Parkinson's law of triviality. Time spent on any item of the agenda will be in inverse proportion to the sum of money involved. Well, in this case, it is only bike shedding we're looking at, so that's fair enough. I feel that we have...
Are you saying bike shedding?
Bike shedding is the term used by the management gurus for Parkinson's law of triviality.
Okay.
It's all right, okay. Chairman, I wouldn't spend too much time on this. It's a passing comment that I think is less relevant now than it was in 1957 when it was developed. I was 1 year old as it happened. I think that the key questions have been resolved. There are a certain number of informatives which I think were very adequately dealt with by Councillor Purra, and with that I think we should move on to vote on approval of the recommendation.
Had a motion proposed and seconded, then I'm afraid we have to go to a vote. So I just wanted to clarify that I think it might be useful to have an informative about requiring certain locking arrangements for the two-tier bikes and access for the CCTV for the general public swiftly. Sorry, just one moment. I'm sorry, members. Once somebody's moved a vote and it's been seconded, we can't take any more discussion. So that's not my choice. That's the nature of, if you move a vote, you've stopped discussion. I haven't stopped discussion. I'm afraid Councillor Fane did. So I'm trusting that our Strategic Sites Development Manager will address some of the points that have been raised in we need to clarify what we're voting for, and that includes the informatives, which Philippa Kelly will go through.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, if I may, could I clarify the potential informatives which you would be looking to include?
So there was certainly one on the locking arrangements for two-tier racks, wasn't there?
If I may just summarise what I believe, I understand
okay.
those informatives would relate to. We would be looking for informatives which advise that the subsequent cycle parking management strategy would provide clarity and clarification of security details relating to the accessibility of the CCTV and details of the secure cycle storage facility, including how it's accessed and the method of operation. Is that correct?
And that there should be accessible locking points on the two-tier racks.
Correct. We could, yeah.
It should be possible to lock a bike to the two-tier racks. Were there any other points that members wished to raise as informatives? Councillor Porra.
Well, Chair, I appreciate we do want to move to vote. I don't want to be here all day, but I'm afraid the officer hasn't had a chance to respond to the things I've asked. So I wonder if Councillors Hawkin and Fane might just withdraw that request to vote immediately, just because, for example, the signage, the wayfinding, not to prolong it for huge amounts, but just to give the officer a chance to reply, because she hasn't had a chance to reply to my questions, and I think Councillor Smart's either. plus a few others. So I don't know if Councillor Fane would be kind enough to hold fire just for a little bit so we could get the answers. I'm very happy to move to vote once I've had a
Councillor
response.
Fane, are you happy to withdraw for a moment?
Chair, I made that comment in the light of the fact that most members who had signalled they wanted to speak had done so, and my proposal was seconded by Councillor Porra, I thought, and we had already passed the stage where we were seeking matters of clarification. We were in the debate, so I think it is appropriate. And I beg your pardon, my mistake. In the light of that, of course, I'm happy for...
Just one moment, members.
Just a troublemaker.
Can we have points of clarification from Mairead to the points raised by Councillor Smart? And I'm hoping that will encourage you to put your hand down, Councillor Smart, because I'm going to ask Mairead to answer the questions that you raised. Would that be okay, Councillor Smart?
Can I speak?
I'm asking you, are you happy that that the case officer responds to the questions that you raised before we then go to a vote?
I think Councillor Fane's proposal was very good. It's just that I asked some questions and just wanted to follow up on one of them.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. Are you happy that I asked the case officer to respond to your questions before we then go to a vote?
She pretty much already has, I think. It's just I wanted to ask a question about something you said with...
What is your question, Councillor Smart? And Councillor Fane, could you turn your microphone off, please? Thank you.
Well, it's not a question, is it? Because we're in debate at the moment. But the point was, my last point was about the types of vehicles. And you surmised what I said to imply that officers had made this decision. But I wasn't criticising officers. I was criticising the applicant. It's the applicant that's put this application on the table today. So Network Rail is the...
So it's the transport assessment maybe that...
It's them
okay.
that I'm
Thank you very much.
about,
Okay.
not officers.
So, Mairead, would you like to try and answer the questions that have been raised by both Councillor Porra, including signage, and also by Councillor Smart? And I have a list of those if you would like reminding.
Thank you, Chair. So there was a point around the biodiverse roof that this is covered in a lot more detail in the station design condition, but ultimately if less cycle parking were provided, the roof is required as part of the design and there would just be empty space under the canopy. So the cycle parking is all within the canopy of the building and it is the best use of space to provide what is shown. In terms of signage being provided before the site opens, the signage is part of the wayfinding strategy, which is part of the landscape condition. I don't have the condition wording in front of me today, but I am quite confident that it is a prior to the station opening trigger. In terms of the signage, again, on the cargo bike areas, I think that is something that we could include as an informative, that it should be dealt with through the wayfinding strategy, that should be covered off so that it is clear that those should be for cargo bikes, etc., on a first come basis rather than standard bikes. I think I've responded to most of Councillor Smart's points, but just to highlight that the condition is about cycle parking and requiring cycle parking details rather than details of anything else. But I do take the point that hasn't been considered.
Thank you very much. So, Councillor Porra.
Just to add, for the condition around CCTV that Ms Kelly mentioned, could we add timely? Because the point is the information needs to be provided in a timely manner. And that seems to be one of the biggest sticking points so far, is people go, well, we haven't got time to look at it yet, by which point your bike is, several miles away on the back of someone's lorry. So,
okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
So I'm going to ask Philippa if she will bring us to the recommendation with any informatives that we've added.
Thank you, Chair. So the recommendation is one of approval of the part discharge of this planning condition. Just receive confirmation of what you're looking at on the committee report.
So we can find it on 17.1 on page 58 of our report. It's referred to as approve and partially discharge planning condition.
Thank you, Chair. And we'd be looking at a number of additional informatives. An informative to advise of the need for the subsequent cycle parking management strategy to provide clarification of the security details relating to timely accessibility of CCTV and the secure cycle storage facility, including how this is accessed and secured and the method of operation of the locking devices on the two-tier racks. And another informative to clarify that it's an expectation that cycle signage would be dealt with through the wayfaring strategy, which forms part of a separate condition. Wayfinding, sorry. Thank you.
And that the signage will be in place for the cargo bike racks as well, and that should be prior to the station opening. Lovely. And do you want the wording of those informatives to come back to Chair and Vice Chair so we get those?
I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, okay. So with all of that in place, are we happy? Okay, to go to a vote. So members, would you like us to do a hands up or vote on here? Okay, right. So members, if you are happy, as at 17.1, to approve and partially discharge the planning condition 22 of the previous Transport and Works Act application, which was 21/02957/TWA, would you like to raise your hand? Very much, members. That's unanimous approval. Thank you very much. Right, we've been going for an hour and a half. Does anybody want 5 minutes break before we move into the next one, please? So we'll come back at soon after past as we can. Thank you, members. Could you take us offline? Thank you. Right, members, thank you. Let's go live. Thank you. Okay, so after a short pause, Councillor Bagent.
Chair, can I just make a point? Whilst I admit to being a member of Cambridge Cycling Campaign, I'm in no way their spokesperson.
No,
I just am a
don't.
member.
No, I was just thinking that, just to ask you, that's fine. Okay, so we're moving on, members, now to agenda item 4, which is 21-02957, condition 17, which relates to the detailed design approval for the Cambridge South Station. So, Mairead, over to you as Principal Planning Officer.
Thank you, Chair. So again, just to draw your attention to the amendment sheet, there's just a minor change to the report suggested, just a point of clarification that the secondary means of escape bridge falls within the parameter plans, and I'll highlight that in the presentation as well. And then there's just a clarification on the reason for partial discharge. Details of signage on the actual building for the station haven't been provided yet, and those fall under this condition. So those would need to come back as a further submission to close out the conditions. So that's why the recommendation is for partial discharge again.
Thank you very much. So would you like to proceed with your presentation? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So much of the opening will be as the first presentation, but I'll try and get through this quite quickly. We've been through the location of the site and the context of the site. And we've also been through the planning background. Also just to kind of highlight that the station design has been through lots of consultation and a lot of pre-application advice from officers. It's also been to Cambridgeshire Quality Panel, and it, as you may recall, came for a briefing to the Joint Development Control Committee back in February. And as I've outlined, the application was originally, it was dealt with as a Transport and Works Act order, which has a deemed planning permission associated with it, and condition 17 deals with the station design. And then obviously this shows the station, just to highlight the curved roof with the sedum here and the biodiverse canopies, which we've sort of touched upon in the cycle parking on the west here, and then you can see them here on the east side of the station. In terms of the actual wording of the condition that we're looking at today, the key things is that the station design complies with the parameter plans that were approved as part of the Transport and Works Act order. Again, we have touched on that briefly in the last condition. It also needs to comply with the design principles that were also approved as part of the Transport and Works Act order. And the key thing being that it's a high quality development and that the impact on Hobson's Park and the Greenbelt is acceptable. So again, we have the platform level plans that we've previously looked at, and we've sort of been through the forecourt and where the vehicular access is to the east, and how the station is accessed from the west by pedestrians and cyclists. Here we have a plan showing a little bit more detail on the platform level. So you can see on either side the ticket gate is at the entrance line to the building at either side. There is a forecourt then once you enter, with some seating areas on both sides. On the west side there is one toilet here, and the rest of the these spaces here are just kind of general station spaces, not open to the public. There is this unit here which could be a retail use or a community use. I know the applicant is currently looking for an end user of this unit. The toilet here has access to it, has been raised as a point by Cambridge past, present and future, and the applicant has confirmed that the station operator, as part of the terms of their lease, will be required to provide access to that toilet by non-travelling users of the park. So although it is behind the ticket gate, the operator will have to make some provision for access to that. On the biomedical campus side, there is a changing places room, baby changing facilities, as well as a number of toilets here. There's a station control room and staff mess, as well as the cycle parking for staff, which I've already outlined. There's a platform at either side of the tracks, as well as this new island platform here. And then moving to the bridge level, so both of the concourse areas are connected by an overbridge, and that is the only element at first floor other than the secondary means of escape as well, which I'll come to later on in the presentation, but that's further south. And then just to provide a little bit more detail on that bridge access, as I mentioned earlier, the stairs here will have a railing on either side so that bikes can be wheeled up and down to all of the platforms. Each platform is served by 2 lifts, which are larger than standard size lifts and can take two people with 2 bikes or a wheelchair. And then you can also just see the canopies of that cover the platforms here, which are covered in PV panels, as well as the biodiverse and blue and green roof that covers the cycle parking here and on the east side as well. And then again, the roof of the main building here, the blue and green roofs that cover the cycle parking here, and then PV panel canopies that cover the platforms on either side and the island platform. So as I say, the scheme has been to Cambridge Equality Panel as well as a briefing to JDCC. And as a result of these, there has been amendments to the secondary means of escape bridge, which I will come to later on in the presentation. There's been some further work to help reduce the perceived depth of the roof, and this will come through as a detail on the materials condition. The inclusion of the cycle rails on the stairs was something that members were very interested in at the briefing, and was something that the applicant hadn't provided at that stage. So that is a really important addition, as well as some amendments to both of the forecourts, but this is part of the landscape condition, so I won't dwell on this today. So as I touched upon earlier, the Transport and Works Act order granted a maximum station envelope as part of the parameter plans, and that's shown on this plan here. And we saw this plan earlier, which has the orange dashed line, which shows the maximum envelope. And as I highlighted earlier, the building does fall within the maximum envelope, and actually the key point being the impact on Hobson's Park, and the canopy is shorter and narrower than the maximum envelope permitted. And in terms of the height, as I outlined, the canopies are below the dotted line here, but the guardrail actually brings them up to the maximum envelope. It's 1.1 metres taller than the canopy. The main station building is just slightly under 2 metres below the maximum height permitted by the maximum station envelope. And then also, I won't dwell on the design principles, but the applicant has submitted a design compliance statement that's a very detailed document that outlines how the development of the station building as well as the landscape complies with the design principles that were approved as part of the Transport and Works Act order. I thought this was quite a useful slide just to provide a bit of context in terms of the height of the building in comparison to surrounding structures. So this is actually not a plan that's being proposed today. This is a plan from the Transport and Works Act order, and the orange line is the maximum station envelope. And here you can see the height of the mound of the guided busway bridge. which is 23 metres, and the actual bridge being about 2 metres above that, so that takes it to 25 metres. The actual height of the station roof is 27.6 metres as approved, so it's sort of a couple of metres beyond the height of the guided busway bridge. And then here we have the elevations, which we briefly looked at earlier. You can see the span of the curved roof on Hobson's Park that then comes down to cover the cycle parking with the biodiverse canopy, with the secure store here and the open canopy here. The ticket gate here, the base of the building would be clad in weathered steel. The overbridge is on top here, and this is glass. And then on the eastern forecourt, similarly, we have the ticket gates, which are covered by the canopy, and again, the overbridge here. And then we have some elevations. The first elevation is looking from the guided busway bridge side. So you can see the base of the building here and the span of the roof that will curve away from the bridge. And then this sort of sectional view here is sort of looking down from the kind of Addenbrooks Road side. Obviously, you'll have the canopies that sort of come out beyond here. But this just shows the actual building itself and with the overbridge. So the materials palette, the actual details of materials will be approved as part of a separate condition, but the palette of materials has been chosen to help integrate better with the parkland setting, and the sort of colours and textures used are considered to respond well to that, and the urban design officer is satisfied with the materials palette. So here we have the view that we saw earlier of the biodiverse roof on Hobson's Park. As I've outlined, the actual footprint of the building on Hobson's Park is less than the maximum station envelope. The materials used are considered to respond well to the parkland setting. The canopy is a very important part of the design in terms of biodiversity and the BREEAM credentials of the building. Network Rail have considered a reduction in the size of the canopy to address concerns by the Residents' Association, and this is considered to not have any benefit, as there would be the canopies of the platforms would be visible beyond. And overall, the impact of the station building on Hobson's Park is considered to be acceptable. And we just have this view here, which shows you the ticket gate and station entrance with the area that covers the entrance and the overbridge above. And as noted earlier, as part of the materials condition, the applicant is exploring providing a bullnose detail to this fascia to help make the roof profile appear more slender. It's quite a thick depth because it is a blue and green roof. It has a lot of function to hold. So the SME bridge is one of the key changes since the Transport and Works Act order. It was initially intended to be, as you can sort of make out from the plan here, which is from the Transport and Works Act order, a bespoke structure that spanned all of the platforms, but the applicant has done some further work into the need for the bridge, and it was found that it doesn't need to span all 3 platforms, it just needs to provide means of escape from the island platform onto Hobson's Park. The means of escape from the east would remain on that side. So an off-the-shelf product was proposed. Following on from feedback from Cambridgeshire Quality Panel and in consultation with the urban design officer, the applicant has worked to customise the standard product in terms of the material finishes, so it ties in better with the station building, and that this is considered to be acceptable in terms of urban design. And then just to highlight that the height of the bridge is below what is permitted by the parameter plans, that this sits comfortably within the parameter plans. And then here we just have this visual to show the bridge providing access off of the island platform. And then finally we just have this slide of the eastern forecourt showing the access through the ticket gates here. The ticket machines are behind this point here, and this would come forward as part of the landscape condition. And just to conclude that the development complies with the parameter plans, complies with the design principles. It's considered to be a high quality development. The impact on Hobson's Park is considered to be acceptable, and the design has developed over the pre-application process, and in particular following feedback from Cambridgeshire Quality Panel and the Joint Development Control Committee. And the recommendation is to approve and partially discharge the condition with details of signage needed to close off the condition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mairead. So I think our public speaker from the Trumpington Residents Association has now left. So I'm going to move on to the representatives from Network Rail, which is Emma Smith. Thank you. You've got 3 minutes when you're ready.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Emma Smith. I'm the Network Rail Senior Sponsor for the Cambridge South Infrastructure Enhancement Project. Cambridge South is among one of the highest priority projects for Network Rail's Anglia route. The approval of this station design condition is integral to the successful delivery of the station to enable the project to meet its ambitious planning and construction programme. The new railway station will provide access to a growing area of high-quality employment, reduce local congestion, and will connect the Cambridge Biomedical Campus with potential destinations such as Central London, Stansted Airport, via an environmentally sustainable transport system. Cambridge South Station will serve a growing community of science and healthcare specialists, employees, and hospital visitors. The proposed station design and footprint are fully in accordance with the maximum station envelope as discussed previously. They were approved as part of our Transport Works Act order and request for deemed planning. As recognised within the committee's report, the proposed station design responds to its setting within Hobson's Park, the Green Belt, and the Biomedical Campus, and is considered to be of a high quality design. The station has been designed to meet BREEAM Excellence rating and has a biodiverse roof with photovoltaic panels. We have a 10% biodiversity net gain improvement within the scheme in order to create an environmentally sustainable facility. The application has gone through extensive pre-application discussions with GCSP's technical officers, the JDCC, the Cambridge Equality Panel, and other key stakeholders. This consultation has been fundamental to the evolution of the detailed design for the project. And as a direct result of that feedback, we have changed the design to declutter within the eastern forecourt, include cycle rails onto the station stairs within the station, and also relocate the ticket machines. We encourage the planning committee to support the findings and recommendations of GCSP's planning officers and approve this application. This will support us in achieving the successful delivery of the station, which will provide significant economic, social, and environmental benefits to the local area far and wide beyond the Cambridgeshire region. Thank you very much.
And before you leave, I'd like to ask you some points of clarification under my own chair's discretion. One of which is, could you clarify what you envisage the route through the station would be if somebody arrived on one side with a bike and there was no parking there? How would they get to the parking on the other side?
So from my experience of previously being a station manager, I would advise, or my view would be that if there was no space on one side of the station, rather than entering the station, so going through the paid ticket gates, I would, and also as a cyclist as well, use the road to go over to the other side and not actually enter the station and use it as a means to traverse, just because I would say that that's kind of like the most easiest way. That's how I would envisage it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That's fine. Other questions I'm going to address to our case officer. So thank you very much for your presentations, both. Thank you. So, Mairead, I'll kick off with some questions, but I'll take others as I can see. Yep. I haven't got any particular order. But so far, I've got councillors Bagent, Porrer, Garvey. Did councillor Stobart have his hand up? Yes. And councillor Smart. Okay, right. So, Mairead, could you just explain what is your understanding of how the WC will be publicly accessible when it's inside the ticket barriers? And the other one was, are we sure that there is the glass in both sides gives people a view out? It shows it in the CGI, but in the in the plans it shows it as blue. And I wanted to be sure that when people are on that overbridge, they can see both the science park, the campus, but also Hobson's Park.
Thank you, Chair. So I don't have the particular details of how the access arrangements would happen, but just that it is part of the lease for the operator, that it's a requirement, and there's no sort of planning mechanism for that to be required. And then in terms of the overbridge, yes, it would be finished in glass that you would be able to see out. I think it's got a bit of a texture, but you would be able to see out of the glass.
Councillor Bagent, then.
Chair, just a point of clarification. Point 18.5, which is hard and soft landscaping, is going to be dealt with delegation. Does that mean it won't be coming to this committee?
That's what it means, but all right.
Through you, Chair, yes. This application is before you as it was in the wider public interest, and the hard and soft landscape condition hasn't been sort of selected as something similar. So the intention is that will be dealt with under delegated powers.
Can I please? Yeah, I'm concerned that car parking and routes and things should come through this committee.
About it, the landscaping is part of the structure that was already, the actual shape of it is part of the structure that's kind of been considered. Are you not happy to allow the officers to consider that?
I did think about it, Chair, and I think that it should come through this committee.
You'll bear that in mind. I'll keep that as a thought. Councillor Porrer.
Thank you very much. First, I did want to say some positive things, because we always pick the bad things. Welcome the toilet access, because I think that's really important. I welcome the blue roof, the sedum roof, and we're using water to flush the toilets, which is something we're always pushing our applicants to do. And I welcome the changing places toilet, because I think, again, they're absolutely critical now for allowing people mobility. One probably silly question, I don't quite understand what a bullnose end is, and
Yes,
I didn't know whether it was on the pointy end or if it was on the slopey bit. So if Marie could just clarify what that is for my peace of mind. Could we have an informative, something about how the park can sign to the toilets? Because obviously it would be good to make sure people know they can use those toilets. Is the officer happy about light spillage? I think you probably are, but I just wanted to confirm that because it came up. And finally, the cycle rails that will go up and down, I understand that at Cambridge Station there were some issues with them not being fitted properly. So are we confident that they will be fitted properly? And also that they will be fitted before the station becomes operational, because again, it's about that incentivising decent travel. I'm not sure if there's a ticket office at this one, interestingly, but I think that's a slightly different debate. My only real concern with this is the secondary means of escape bridge. I understand why we need it. I am disappointed that it's not bespoke. And we haven't really had any long plans that show where it is in relation, because we've got all this beautiful green roof and sloping station, which I have to say I find visually good. It does worry me that the other end, right on Hobson's Park, we're going to have a kind of pretty ugly bog standard escape thing. So I wondered if the officer could talk a little more about that, and just, I can see it on that plan. I think it's just to the left with the 3 black slopes for the steps, but my concern is the visual impact on Hobson's Park.
because it would be a real shame if that damages what is actually otherwise quite a sympathetic green, blue building. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Just dealing with those two first before I go on to the others. I'm going to ask Philippa Kelly to explain what she has just said.
I may, it was in response to Councillor Bajent's observation about the landscaping condition, which the officers have taken the approach that it was just the design condition that would come before you. That was your expectation. You were aware of that from a previous briefing. All other conditions relating to the station are being dealt with under officer delegated powers. If any member feels that it would be of interest to JDCC to hear one of those other conditions, I would suggest that they would then wish to consider deploying their calling powers under the JDCC terms of reference, giving their reasons and the planning grounds on which that request is based. But that can be picked up separately with the planning case officer and the respective members. Thank you.
And Mairead, could you address the points that Councillor Porro raised? So many things that were welcome. What was the bull nose? The sign for the public to that there is a public toilet inside the station, if that's how it's going to be. Are the rails on the stairs going to be secured properly at the outset? And the secondary means of escape bridge, where will it be, and what will it look like? I must say, I thought the same about the secondary means of escape bridge. It looked like a pretty industrial structure over the top of Hodson's Park. But anyway, perhaps you can address those.
Thank you, Chair. So the bullnose profile is difficult for me to illustrate without a pen and paper, but so the roof profile here is quite thick because of all of the functions of the roof, as I've said, and the idea would be that a detail would mean the top element would protrude slightly further, which would then cast a shadow, which would then make that appear more slender, and this is a solution that was suggested by the urban design, the council's urban design officer.
Like this, it would actually be
The curve.
It would still have the same depth, but it would appear. Signage relation to the public toilet being inside the ticket gate.
So I would suggest an informative could be included, but perhaps that it's not necessarily signage or that it's signposted somewhere. There are, so as you can see in this visual from Hobson's Park, the ticket machines are behind these sort of screens here, and there's sort of tickets and information bits on the other side of the screen, and perhaps that might be the place for it. I'm just wary of wanting to not have too much signage, so that it's perhaps something that's a little bit more open, so a design solution to that, but I think it would be important to signpost that somehow. In terms of light spillage, there is a separate condition to deal with lighting, but as part of the pre-app, we have reviewed draft information, and that's been through environmental health and ecology. In terms of the cycle rails, we haven't been provided with any detailed plans, and I guess if members did feel very strongly that was needed, that could be provided, again, as part of a later submission because of it being a partial discharge. In terms of the SME bridge, what I would say is that it's a very lightweight structure. It's quite small. It's quite substantially smaller than the bespoke structure that was proposed under the Transport and Works Act order. And while it's I'm back again. While it's disappointing that we're getting an off-the-shelf product, a lot of work has been done with urban design to ensure that the materials will respond to the materials in the rest of the station building, and overall we were satisfied that that impact was acceptable.
Thank you. And I'm assuming that rails being fixed to stairs, we assume that a builder is going to do that properly in the first place, or we trust that they will, rather than require something special to ensure that they do. Councillor Garvey.
Yes, I was just wondering whether the rail is going to be electrified, and if not, then the bridge is at such a height that electric lines can be put in afterwards.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not 100% certain, but my understanding is that it is electrified. I think that there are gantries around the station.
In fact, on your diagram of the second floor of the station, it showed the tops of gantries, just as actually, but it did actually show the tops of gantries at the second floor level. But it must be suitable to go under the bridge. They would not. Can't believe the network would have designed something that wasn't going to go under their own bridge. Are you satisfied with that, Councillor Garvey? Thank you. Okay, Councillor Stobart.
Thank you. So I just had for the planning officer one brief question about the, as it were, the traveller experience as you're going through either of the two doorways. I'm assuming that you immediately feel that sense of space. So it's very high ceiling. You come in, you've got space. Am I right in that assumption?
Through you, Chair. So as part of the design compliance statements, there are some actual CGIs of what the inside would look like. And yes, there is a real sense of space. You can see the frame of the building and the sweep of the stairs, which is a curve. It would be a concrete stairs, but would be clad in, I think, an orange coloured material. So it would be quite a kind of open space with this dramatic kind of stairs and the frame of the curved frame of the building.
May I continue, Chair? First of all, thank you for that. Second was, it may seem like a bit of a side issue, but I just want to reflect for a moment on heritage. We don't often talk about heritage in regard to these kind of infrastructure things, but bear in mind that this railway line, and I should correct that paragraph, I think it's 2.4. This would be known generally as the Great Eastern Main Line between Liverpool Street and King's Lynn. So that function, the Liverpool Street service, has got a bit downgraded in recent years, but this was really the premier route of the Great Eastern Railway, or one of the two. Now that is possibly beside the point, with regard to this development. We have underlined the importance of heritage, particularly as to where people live. Well, people are kind of spending a lot of time in the station, coming and going, and I wondered if we could introduce a kind of heritage thought. And perhaps that's reflected through the public art. I think their design is too firmly pinned down now to say, well, let's use some cues from some Great Eastern stations. That wouldn't be appropriate, but perhaps some cues reflecting back, because originally this would have been the Eastern Counties Railway, which was later absorbed into the Great Eastern. So that was just a thought. I think we value heritage, and to give that kind of historical dimension just makes the traveller's life a little bit more interesting. Yeah. May I just add one more point, Chair?
Do go ahead.
Thinking about, if you stand on the edge of the Trumpington Meadows development and look across Hobson's Park, I'm just wondering about the visual impact, because yes, you will see the station, but you will see also the buildings behind, and some are yet to be developed, the AstraZeneca buildings. So I'm wondering if the station is going to actually take your eye upwards, and so perhaps diminishing the impact of that extensive bicycle parking. So thinking about this in context, I think the design is very sympathetic to that situation. It's green, it fits. But I'm wondering if, as your eye is led upwards, then it kind of de-emphasises the, that cycle parking impact, if you will. That's why I wasn't so worried in the previous debate about underlining it. But if I could add just a comment about the 500, I think we don't know really what direction the usage of this station will take. Councillor Porrer and I were just debating it a moment ago. There's going to be a lot of changes around South Cambridge. There's Waterbeach, there's, of course, the biomedical campus development, but the 500 seems an adequate buffer for all that uncertainty as to the travel patterns which people will take up. So I think we do definitely need it, and I think the design is appropriate to that. But let's also see it in the wider context, and I think it's a great contributor to the look of Addenbrooke's and the biomedical campus as you look from the west. I think that's all I've got to say,
Thank you, Councillor
Chair.
Stobart. I'd like, if we could, to pick up on the heritage aspect, and we've been reassured about the traveller experience. Can we pick up an informative about the traveller, the heritage aspects, and the Mairead, through you?
Thank you, Chair. So there is a public art condition that we're dealing with at the moment. It's a live condition and it's very high level. It's seeking partial discharge for a kind of a start to the strategy because it's at quite an early stage. And I would suggest perhaps an informative on that condition rather than adding to this condition.
I'd be happy with that. I think that's right. I sit on another body that looks at travel on rail, and there's quite a wish for railway stations in particular to echo their historic past, so as well as look to the future. So it's quite nice to get the balance if we can. So yes, if we can add that. And I have other thoughts which I will save to the end. Councillor Smart, and did anybody else want to raise any matters of clarification? No? Okay, before we go after Councillor Smart? No? Okay, so Councillor Smart, do go ahead.
So this is a big centre of employment, and obviously with Addenbrooke's and Patworth and all the other things that are there, and other hospitals being built soon probably. So it's great that we've got a train station proposed, and thank you to the speaker, Emma, for coming to speak to the item in person today. It's good to see. So a few points along the way in terms of the report, toilets and changing.
Sorry, Councillor Smart, are these questions of clarification or are they matters for debate?
What would you like?
Questions of clarification at this stage.
Clarification, okay. I've got some of those, I think, yeah. Yep. So it would be good to clarify the access to toilets. So I know toilets have been raised already, but just to be clear, it looks like you've got to cross the bridge to get to the toilets or the changing places facility, which is, of course, a facility for people that are less able if you're on the wrong side, if you could just clarify that. It might be good to clarify the difference between blue roof and green roof. I don't know if all residents will understand that. I've got that question isn't for here then, so it might be good to clarify if the weathered steel you describe, Mairead, is Corten steel, I presume, and Corten steel is used in Long Road School and means that you can't use mobile phones within the building. I presume that as it's not completely enclosing the building, although the green and blue roof will have a steel construction probably, that mobile phones will be usable, as that's the main way that most people, well, young people at least, if not a lot of us, travel using phones with tickets on. That will be important. Good to clarify if there's any public art involved in the facility. Good to clarify if the security at the entrance is satisfactory. I mean in terms of any vehicles being able to drive into the facility where people are milling around, because, you know, at Cambridge Central we have those posts to stop that happening. And yeah.
Thank you, Mairead. Do you want to respond to some of those?
Thank you, Chair. So on the toilets point, yes, that's correct. So there is one toilet on the Hobson's Park side of the station, and the changing places room, baby change facilities, and then there's 4 further toilets on the eastern side. So those are predominantly on the biomedical campus side of the station. In terms of the blue and green roof, so I go to the actual roof plan. The main roof of the station is a sedum roof, and that's because it's curved and it's in close proximity to the railway, so it has to be something that it has lower maintenance requirements for that purpose. So the canopies are the blue and green roofs on either side, and as I said, they have railings for access. The blue and green means that they have a drainage function as well, so there are sort of cartons that contain water as well, so they hold water as well as having plant life on top, and it's biodiverse plant life rather than sedum, and the planting mix would come forward as part of the landscaping condition and will be something to reflect the planting mix in the park. In terms of the material on the base of the building, it will be a weathered steel type material. I don't know that it's specifically Corten steel, but it's that sort of colour material. And as I said, that comes forward as part of a separate condition. The actual station building is a timber structure as opposed to being fully sort of metal. But I don't have any sort of detail about mobile phone coverage within the building, but one would imagine as it doesn't have a ticket office and that is the sort of way that things are going, that people rely on mobile phones, that has been considered, I would imagine. In terms of public art, there is a separate condition for this. As I said, there is an application to partially discharge this at this stage. The applicant has a public art consultant that's been engaged, but an artist hasn't been appointed yet. So we're at quite an early stage of that, and no sort of specific public art projects have been identified yet. And then in terms of security of access, again, this sort of falls under the landscape because it will be part of the forecourt design, but I know that this has been considered. There are bollards proposed around the eastern forecourt to prevent anything like that happening, and I know that security is something that has been considered by the applicant as a sort of separate requirement even to planning.
All right, so I'm going to use my chair's discretion to ask Emma Smith if you wouldn't mind answering the question about mobile phone access. Are we sure that the materials that are being used for the building won't block mobile phone signals? Because, as Councillor Smart pointed out, people will undoubtedly be using mobile phones as tickets. Do you want to come forward to the microphone?
So I believe that the designers would have had a look at the operability and the materials and the usage, so that as the station will not have a ticket office, reliance on like mobile phones and data and the utilisation of that will be considered within it. We can take away the specific details about the type of steel, etc., but there will be a glulam timber roof, and then I'm not sure about the specifics of the types of steel, but I would believe that that's been assessed to be practicable.
There's just an outside chance that there's left hand, right hand, and not thinking in the middle. The other one, while you're there, I wanted to ask Councillor Smith, who is the Vice Chair, raised with me the issue that in very dry weather, for example, in June this year, he had to water his own green roof because it was very dry and there was a risk of the sedum dying if he hadn't watered it. So what I just wanted to clarify is there facility to actually water the green roof if it needs to be maintained? You know, it's all very well thinking of blue-green, but actually they're going to be in different locations. One will be a drainage channel, won't it? And one will be the assumption is it's going to rain and drain off into a channel which can then be used for toilet flushing and all sorts of things. But is there a facility to actually pump water up there to irrigate if necessary?
I'm not sure about the specific element about irrigation and up there, but I do know that as part of the station design, we are looking at how the station will be maintained and operable afterwards. So that is something that will be have been considered. I'm not a specialist on the diverse roof, but I would say that it will be worked through the details of that.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, so thank you very much. We'll now move into a more general debate if members would like to. So is there anything further members would like to raise? I mean, my feeling is that that the applicants have worked through this very carefully with the officer, and I know Maireada's worked quite hard on this. There's a lot of parameters to take into account, obviously, and I think people have questioned the principle of the numbers of cycle parking spaces in toto, as well as how many on the left and how many on the right, west and east. And I think we have to accept that, for my money, if we're going to have cycle parking and it's going to be a very busy station, I'd rather have the cycle parking established at the beginning, even if not all of it was used right at the outset. But because I think there will be a greater need for this parking as time goes on. So I think we would be mad not to accept all the cycle parking that is being offered as part of this application. I think, in my view, the principles of how the station is being developed so that it provides the service and provides for cycle parking, because we really want there not to be any cars here and not too much vehicle access, I think is really important. And I think we've got a good application. We've got added biodiversity through the use of these blue-green roofs. And so my feeling is that there's no reason to object to this application. I think the balance between west and east, is a matter, we won't know how it's going to be used. And as Councillor Stobart said before, we won't know how it's going to be used. But anyway, members, is there anything people would like to raise? Councillor Stobart and Councillor Smart.
Chair, if I might, just dwell on that comment about usage and how flexible it might be. One of the routes that we were talking about, Councillor Porran and I were reflecting on, was between Waterbeach and Cambridge South. So Waterbeach could potentially become a very pleasant destination for those who are actually going to work on the biomedical campus. And it brings into play all sorts of things. So Councillor Bajan talked about novel types of transport machinery, but actually there may be novel uses. So one could imagine, I think it's done more in continental Europe, that you leave a bike at the station so that when you arrive, you cycle then to your workplace. That's not uncommon. And so what we might find is on that east side of the station, people are leaving bikes overnight, commuting back to Waterbeach, and they can walk home, but they work over the far side of the campus. So there might be all sorts of modes developing. So I just wonder how well we will gather the data on how that happens and then use it to perhaps refine the facilities in due course. And I guess that's down a lot to Network Rail and the train companies, but as the council, we should be checking on these things, because that source of data could be very useful in how we do our planning in due course, and how we inform the next generation of a local plan, for example. So that's on the bicycle usage. Just thinking, this is, I suspect, quite revolutionary in the Greater Cambridge area for a grey water scheme. And it would be great to understand how it's working out as it's operated. And I wonder if we could find some way of working with Network Rail in order to assess and for us to build our knowledge of how grey water schemes work of this nature. I think it's fascinating, the blue and green roof arrangement. but grey water schemes have, got a mixed reputation, and I think through our design choices, we can actually, we can be informed, but we need to be informed from operating experience. So it would be good to feel that we could, it would be good to find a way of taking this data as feedback into our thinking in the future.
Thank you. And actually what you're saying also makes me think we need to be very careful that Voi scooters don't just plant a parking zone somewhere unexpected without our approval, which could cause considerable difficulties at the access to this station. So we might want to think about how we engage with them about that. Can we put that as a sort of question for the end, as it were? And also, I think we'd need to have an undertaking from Network Rail that they would be happy to share that sort of data with us about monitoring how the green-blue roof is working, and also how transport movements are happening through the station. I'm going to say on camera and on record, I'm getting a nod from Emma Smith. Thank you. So that's good. Thank you. Councillor Smart.
Yeah, three things. So it's good about the material mix. Commend the applicant on that. It's good to see less concrete like that used, things that are more sustainable. So, and it looks good as well. But I'll come to that in a minute. The bad side for me is the bridge. So it's less beautiful than it could have been, clearly, probably to save my respect.
You mean the SME bridge?
Yeah, SME. I was going to come on to that. That's a point of clarification, which it might be too late for now, but I was wondering what an SME is. I have no idea. But the main point
Was
I'm
the
getting at...
secondary means of escape bridge.
Oh,
I just wanted to clarify, that's the bridge you were saying was not very attractive.
Yeah, yeah. So the thing is an off-the-peg thing can be good in an eclectic mix of design items, but this is a well-constructed, well-designed, good-looking, which all fits well together except for that bridge. So it's a bit unfortunate, but nevertheless, it's only one thing and not enough to, cause me to vote against the item. So I think the most important thing about this application in terms of the way it's designed and the way it looks is that in terms of architecture, it fits well into its context. That's the most important thing about any good architecture, is to recognise its context and the context within which it sits, the green. I think you're right, Chair, in terms of voting on this item. So I shall be voting to support it unless I hear anything bad till we get to that time.
Thank you very much, Councillor Smart. Does somebody else wish to make any comments? Right, in that case, I'm going to move to the vote. So, but first, we'll hear the detail from Philip. So the recommendation, members, is on page 36. It's paragraph 20.1 of our agendas.
Thank you, Chair, that is. And the recommendation is to approve and partially discharge this condition, which is condition 17 of 21.02957 TWA.
And were you going to, there was some suggestions that we would have an informative regarding the sign for the public with regard to where the public toilet was.
That's correct, Chair. So I took a note that there was a suggestion which we can certainly build into the decision notice to include an informative which encourages appropriate directional signage for users of the toilet facilities and appropriate placement around the building.
And the other one was the reference to in the public art part of things, which the case officer pointed out that there is an informative as part of another approval which could cover this heritage, incorporating heritage into the public art aspect.
If I could clarify that
Yeah,
point,
sure.
please, because as my understanding, the public art details relate to a different condition, which isn't before members today for determination. In my view, it wouldn't be appropriate for you to request an informative on an application that isn't before you today, but absolutely, we can take that that desire away. Obviously, the applicants are here today, they're nodding their head, they have heard what you're saying, and Mairead can lead on that as part of her work with that public art condition detail separately.
Great, sorry, I didn't mean to imply that was informative on this. I meant it was going to be delivered through the other. And the only other thing I wanted to check is can we exert any control over the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority Voi scooter project as to where they put their parking zones? Because I do think some discussion about, because clearly if they go this far, I don't know if they do, does anybody know if the Voi scooters go this far? They certainly probably will in due course. And so actually I can see a lot of people wanting to use Voi scooters to get around the biomedical campus. And we know that the space on the eastern side of this station is going to be very constrained. And so I would like to think that we had some control over where any parking zones would be located. Our legal advisor is shaking his head.
I'm afraid it wouldn't be within your gift, the control of this JDCC, to require this or seek to action that through the determination of this particular condition, or indeed any other application which becomes before you.
However, we as district and county councillors can do all sorts of things. Councillor Bagent.
Chair, I return to my very first point about the car parking and the landscaping of this area that will be delegated. I think it shouldn't be delegated. I'm repeating that for very much the same sort of thing that you're talking about. Added to which we have a situation at Cambridge Central Station where the taxi usage is diabolical because of the design programme that was accepted. And we have difficulties at Cambridge Central now in trying to change that because the development's gone up around it, and particularly Great North Road there is suffering because of something that we missed along the way. And I think that we are approving the idea in this application that the things will be delegated, and I'd like to take that out.
Okay, if you'll just pause for a moment. Righto. Okay, thank you. So what I'm being advised is that officers have heard the concerns that you've raised, Councillor Bagent, but currently the landscaping is being dealt with under a separate condition. And if you wish to call that in at the time that that condition is being considered, then that is the way to do it. And I can only suggest that you keep in touch with the case officer with regard to when that comes forward, and you call it in. I'm advised that that's the best way to handle it.
Well, I just don't agree. We could miss it. We might miss it as it comes through. I want to see it. I want to know what the car parking is going to be. I want to know what the landscape is going to be. I want to know what the biodiversity is going to be. And you're asking me to approve that this is delegated. And I don't want to get into a technical argument with lawyers and planners about whether we delegated that responsibility or not. I'd like it just taken out.
I hear what you say.
I-
Before we go, I hear what you say. I'd like to ask our legal advisor to advise us on that, please.
Thank you, Chair. As you've explained, the correct process is for a member, any member, to call in an application if he or she wants it determined here, as opposed to the use of delegated arrangements. There is a list that goes out to members that notifies of the applications that officers have got. This particular one, which Councillor Bagent is concerned about, has not yet been received, but the case officer has made a note and she will liaise with you when it comes in so that you can formally put your application in to have it come here to committee rather than delegated powers.
And I think, Councillor Bagent, that is because it's not part of this condition that we're discharging. It's part of the original TWA application. So I'm sorry, it seems a bit of a roundabout route, but we've been advised that is the best way to do it, and Mairead will liaise with you to make sure you know when it comes through. Councillor Hawkins?
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, as you know, it's South Cambs and Cambridge City Councillors here. In South Cambs, we don't get notifications of applications that come through that
I
are in
was
the
thinking
city.
the same thing, actually, Councillor
So,
Hawkins.
you know, telling us to look out for that and call it in, we can't. We don't know until we get the meeting notes that this is what's coming to committee.
Okay, thanks. I'm sorry about that. If I've misled you, we will need to rely upon case officer to notify Councillor Bagent that the application is in, and probably that could spread to the remainder of this committee as well. Thank you.
No, Councillor Bagent, it's not clumsy, it's the way it has to be done, because that condition is a separate condition to the ones that we're considering today. So
It's not. In this application today, at 18.3, I think it says, it is delegated. It says that it's delegated.
no, but it's not delegated, it's delegated as a result of the TWA application, not because of what we're doing today.
We're delegating it.
Yes. That will come as a separate application, Councillor Bagent.
I know that.
So I appreciate if you wish to use the word clumsy, I appreciate that is the way it is, but that is the way it will happen, okay? Councillor Smart.
Thank you for letting me speak again, Chair. I just missed something off my list. So from my experience of working at the hospital, people come, I mean, I know this is biomedical campus train station, but people might want to come to Addenbrooke's and all the other medical facilities on site. And the reason people come by car is because they can be gotten out their car if they're sick by the main entrance and then wheeled into the hospital. Is there a transport plan to get people from this station to the site, especially people who are less able because they're sick properly, and get them to the hospital, either with, you know, space for wheelchairs or perhaps some sort of people in some sort of bus or something around the site, because otherwise people are going to carry on driving to the main entrance of Addenbrooke's and such like.
And indeed, Councillor Smart, I raised that point myself when we had our briefing about the fact that the bus service is on James Crick Avenue, and that's quite a long walk for somebody who's frail or not very well. But I believe that, Mairead, can you explain that? Sorry, we're getting very detailed compared to just going into a vote, but can you explain?
Thank you, Chair. So the provision of buses, it will fall outside the scope of this planning permission. It's not something we can require, but those would be on Francis Crick Avenue. There's no provision for buses within the site. And in terms of what those buses would be, that's sort of not something that we have any control on as part of the application. I know that there have been discussions with Addenbrooke's about potential shuttle buses, but I don't know that that has actually gotten anywhere, or that, you know, we have no comfort that that will happen.
Thank you very much. All right, so I'm going to ask Philippa Kelly to read the details of the recommendation and the informatives again.
Thank you, Chair. The recommendation can be found on page 36 of your agenda at section 20. The recommendation to approve and partially discharge condition 17 of application 21-02957 TWA with an informative to encourage appropriate directional signage for users of the toilet facilities and their placement around the building, with the precise wording of that informative to be agreed with the Chair and the Vice Chair. Okay. Thank you.
Very much. So, members, I'm going to recommend that we go to a vote. And would you like to second that? Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. So, members, those in favour of the recommendation of complying with it, would you like to show your hands? So that is unanimous. Thank you very much, members. And thank you for your useful questions, which I think will have informed the Network Rail representatives here very clearly about the things that we're interested in and concerned about. And I hope we have minuted the fact, I'm sure we will have minuted the fact, that sharing of information with regard to the CCTV and, what was the other thing? The monitoring details about usage, transport usage at the station, who's using it and going where and what. That would be extremely useful. Thank you. And I'm going to call the meeting to a halt at that point. Thank you. And we'll go offline now. Thank you very much.